When one considers the book of Judges and Ruth, one can tell that not all is well with Israel. As things enter the time period described in the book we call 1 Samuel, do they get any better? How do things proceed for Israel in these days? The book that we know as 1 Samuel is the companion volume to 2 Samuel. In Greek, in the Septuagint, is known as First Reigns. 2 Samuel is known as Second Reigns. 1 Kings is Third Reigns. 2 Kings is Fourth Reigns. And that's probably the better way for us to look at it. Samuel is most certainly not the author of the books of Samuel, because Samuel is reckoned as dead by the chapter 25 of 1 Samuel. So there's plenty of material that covers time where Samuel is no longer alive. Samuel is the predominant character in the first book of Samuel, but is not present at all in the second book of Samuel. And what is going on is we are describing Israelite history. In the book of 1 Samuel, we're describing Israelite history from the birth of Samuel until the death of Saul. And we believe this all took place in the 11th century BC, from roughly around 1100 to 1000 BC. When the book would have been written is something we cannot entirely know, nor do we know who wrote it. But we have confidence that it was written by a historical prophet, God inspired to that end, because we see Jesus quoting stories from it, like in Mark 2. We see Hebrews author making appeal to it. This is just part of the recognized, understood history of Israel. They would have no doubt written it based upon all kinds of chronicles that have been written around the same time as the events and contemporaneous witness, and would have been put together at some point during the days of the monarchy or perhaps into the exile. In fact, it's very important. This theme that we have here of Samuel with David is going to be something we can see in Luke, kind of as a way of looking at John the Baptist and Jesus. There are some associations going on there. And we can even see within the text the fact that the Philistines are the major opponent. We even see some themes, like in the way that the story of Goliath and David is told, seems very much like the Iliad. And so you see a lot of connections between the cultures that make sense in the context in this time period that would not have made as much sense later on at a different time. So when we look at the book of 1 Samuel is grappling with the same themes that we were seeing in Judges and Ruth. And it kind of come to their head here in the book of 1 Samuel. In the first 8 chapters, there's no king yet in Israel. We still have this period of the Judges. So Judges doesn't end with Judges. It continues on. And we learn about the fact that Eli is considered basically a judge at this time. He is the high priest. And we learn about Hannah. Hannah is the mother of Samuel, but she right now is barren. She prays for a child, and she says to God, if you give me this child, I will dedicate him to your service. And this is how, even though Samuel is Ephraimite by origin, he is dedicated to serve God in the temple. And this takes place. He is born, and he is dedicated to the service of God in the temple. We are told about Eli, and especially Eli's sons are wicked sons. And Eli tries to rein them in, but it's very ineffective. And a prophet comes and has condemned Eli and his house. In chapter 3, God calls Samuel. Samuel is not used to it. In fact, we're told there that the visions were very rare in those days. The word of Yahweh had not been given to very many. It was a dark, difficult time in the days of Israel. And God called Samuel. Samuel kept thinking Eli was calling him, but eventually Eli let him know, hey, just tell who speaks you, speak, Lord, your servant hears. Samuel does that. He hears a message of God, and this is the beginning where he will continue to hear messages from God. And as the house of Eli is being condemned and is starting to wane, the fame and the interest in Samuel continues to grow ever larger. The main core of what really shakes Israel to its core, we can see in chapters 4 through 7 of 1 Samuel, in which the Israelites go to war against the Philistines, and they fight the Philistines. They don't do well, and so they bring the Ark of the Covenant. And this really spooks the Philistines. The Philistines say, these are the gods that brought them out of Egypt. How are we going to stand against them? Which is an interesting, own garbled understanding of the Exodus story that the Philistines understand, even though that happened so many hundred years earlier. And so the Philistines are motivated to fight even harder. And the Philistines end up overrunning the Israelites. They kill the sons of Eli. They take the Ark of the Covenant. And this is a disaster for Israel. When Eli hears of it, he falls backwards and dies. When his daughter-in-law is giving birth to someone, hard delivery, she's about to die. When she hears of this, she cries out in agony and she dies. And she declares that the name of her child needs to be Ichabod, because the glory had left Israel. And so Israel is now beset. The Ark of the Covenant is gone. Now, we learn in chapters 5 and 6 how the Philistines try to glory in it, but when they bring it into the house of their idol, Dagon falls apart. The idol falls down. And they start getting afflicted with all these things in Ashdod. And so they give it to the other towns, to Gath, and then to Ekron, and they don't want it because these disasters keep attending to them. And so they realize they need to give it back. And through the seers of the Philistines, they recognize we're going to give 5 of the tumors, 5 of the mice that have been besetting us, and they set them on the ark on a cart with 2 oxen who've never been yoked or anything, and just send them off. And they send off, and they go to Beth-Shemesh. Now, the people in Beth-Shemesh open it up, take the stuff out, and God strikes them dead for that, so it ends up in Kiriath Jearim. And the ark is now back with the people. But we notice here it is God concerned for his glory. It had nothing to do with anything the Israelites did. There's more conflict with the Philistines. And Samuel has gathered all Israel. They told them to renounce their idols. Samuel's going to offer and pray for them. While Samuel's doing that, at Mizpah, the Philistines come up and attack the Israelites. And Samuel sends out the people to fight, and Yahweh fights for the Israelites. The Philistines are sent into a panic, and they are struck down for a long time. And this is when, afterward, Samuel raises up a stone, the Ebenezer, the stone of help, since Yahweh has been their stone of help, has helped them again, the Philistines, who were defeated by them. They defeated. We see that at this moment, Israel has a moment of peace, thanks to in the time of Samuel. Things seem like they're not ideal, but they're the best they've been. And to this point, if we consider Eli and Samuel in light of all the judges that we saw in the book of Judges, from Othniel to Samson, we can see that so far Samuel has been the best judge. But it's at this point where things reach their climax with the ark debacle, and now Samuel has appointed his sons, but his sons are like Eli's sons. They don't do right. They're oppressive. They're exploitative. And the elders of Israel are done. They're done with it all. And they say, we want a king. We want a king like all the nations around us to lead us out and fight our wars. And Samuel is told not to take it personally. Yahweh says that they're rejecting me as king by saying this. And so Samuel lays it out, all the ways that Israel's going to be oppressed and exploited by their own king. And what's going to happen when they have kings. And they don't care. They want a king anyway. And so they all go back to their own city. And then chapters 9 through 12, we have all of the various things that lead to Saul becoming king. Saul meeting with Samuel, prophesying, being anointed as king. Then all Israel's gathered, and Saul is chosen by Lot. He's hiding behind the baggage. They draw him out. Why Saul? He was a head taller than everybody else. He was the tallest guy around. That's what reason they made him king. And then he has his first great expedition where the king of Ammon has been attacking Israelites and causing great distress. He's threatened the city of Jabesh Gilead. But then Saul comes and provides deliverance against the Ammonites and destroys the Ammonites. And the people seem very satisfied with Saul as their king. And so Saul is then established as king. And then Samuel said, look, have I done anything wrong to you? And they all say, no, you haven't. You have treated us with all integrity. And then he warned them about everything that happened. He told Israelite history, everything that happened, how they now rejected Yahweh as their king, and what was going to happen because of that. And the people were all of a sudden regretted making Saul their king. But Samuel encouraged them and implored them, be faithful to God. Continue to be faithful to God. From chapters 13 through 15, we see the reign of Saul before David is anointed. So we see Saul given his chance, Saul given his opportunity. And you see a constant theme here where Saul is willing to listen and hear and obey only so far. So he's willing to do only so much, but then when he starts thinking he's done what he needs to do, that's where he goes in difficult ways. So at first he has all Israel gather together to fight against the Philistines. And he's waiting for Samuel to come offer sacrifice. Samuel is delayed. And because the people are leaving and he's worried about the Philistines, Saul just offers it himself, which again is contrary to the guidelines. And this is a foolish thing, and Samuel condemns him for it. Then there's this great fighting. And we're told, by the way, that there are no blacksmiths in Israel. That in order for an Israelite to get his tool fixed, he had to go to a Philistine to get it fixed. This shows the low level, the depth of the humiliation that Israel is currently experiencing. Like only Saul and Jonathan have true weapons. But in this situation, Jonathan starts an attack, son of Saul, and is successful. And the battle is pressed. But Saul makes his foolish vow, no one should eat anything until he has vengeance on his enemies. Which means everybody gets tired because they're not eating, right? Jonathan found some honey and ate it. And then he was told about the curse that his dad had invoked. And Jonathan's like, see how much better I feel now that I'm eating? What is he doing? God is angry because the vow was broken. And Saul was willing to have Jonathan killed, but the people refused. And the people ransomed Jonathan. But that condemnation will finally meet its end by the end of the book. In chapter 15, the reminder is given, that was all the way back in Exodus, that Amalek needed to be wiped out according to God's commandment. And so Saul went out to do that, but he didn't fully wipe them out. He didn't put them under the ban. He brought some back for offering. And Saul hears this, and Samuel hears this, and Saul keeps insisting he's obeyed God, and Samuel's like, but what's all this here? And finally, Samuel's like, does Yahweh take pleasure in burnt offerings and sacrifices as much as he does in obedience? That obedience is better than sacrifice, paying attention better than the fat of rams. Rebellion is like divination, and presumption is like idolatry. Because you've rejected Yahweh's orders, he has rejected you from being king. And this is when he would seek after man after his own heart. And the kingdom would be torn away from Saul. And it's after Samuel puts Agag to death in chapter 16, Samuel is sent to the house of Jesse of Bethlehem. And he sees the older sons of Jesse. He's convinced the oldest one should be one. But God tells him, God doesn't look at externals. That's not the one. That none of the ones present are the ones who would be chosen. Instead, it's the one out in the fields, out being the shepherd. And David is brought in, and it's David who's anointed as king. And then we start seeing the rise of David from chapter 17 through about chapters 18, 19, where David comes in and is the lyre player to provide some solace for Saul. We have Goliath, great Goliath in chapter 17, who, is the one man who goes out to, be the champion of the Philistines, would fight the Israelite champion. No one will fight him until David decides he's going to go fight him. And of course, Goliath can't believe this young punk's coming after him, but David takes his stone and his sling and slings it right in the head to Goliath's head and cuts Goliath's head off with his own sword. And that leads to a great, powerful victory. And David follows up with more victories, to the point where it's now said, Saul has killed his thousands, as David his thousands of thousands, right? Where far more is said about David than Saul. And Saul is jealous about this. This is when the jealousy comes. And now Saul, for his jealousy, well, I'm gonna just have him go get killed. I'm going to have him marry my daughter if he can kill all these Philistines. And then David goes out and kills even more Philistines than asked. And now Saul knows he's really in for it. And so from chapter 18 on, in the book of 1 Samuel, the rest of the book is really about Saul's jealousy against David, and how Saul is constantly trying to find David to put him to death. Saul is constantly convinced David is trying to conspire against him to kill him and to take over as king. And over again, David escapes, sometimes even from people in his own household. We got to remember, Jonathan became a dear friend of David. David and Jonathan's souls were united almost as one. One of the greatest friendship relationships we can see in Scripture. And Jonathan would protect David. Michal, daughter of Saul, would end up protecting David at one point. Ahimelech was caught in the middle of it, the priest at Nob, where David asked of things for him, and Ahimelech gave it to him, trusting in David. And later on, that would lead to the death of Ahimelech and everybody, because Saul saw it in the worst possible light, as if Ahimelech was helping David out in David's insurgency against him. That is all, again, in the mind of Saul. It's not actually real. So David, as a result, is left out in the desert wastes of Judah. If you ever watch any documentaries on Dead Sea Scrolls, you see that area of Judah and the high mountains and the desert area. That's where David ends up trying to hide from Saul. And people would gather to him. And he ends up becoming kind of a gang leader of his own, to the point where he can go and, for instance, attack the Philistines at some points and save a city at certain times. At 2 times, David has opportunity to harm Saul, where he has Saul in hand. And both times, he doesn't do so. And instead demonstrates to Saul that he's not going to kill the Lord's anointed. He's not trying to kill him. And there's a temporary mending of the fence, so to speak, but then it goes right back to the way that it was. We also have in the story where David ends up taking on Abigail, Nabal's widow, as a wife after he almost killed Nabal's whole family, but Abigail kept him from doing so by showing discretion and wisdom in chapter 25. Very important point. But in the end, we end up here at the end of the book. You reach its climax, and you've got this predicament. because we're going to see what's going to happen to Saul, but we need to make sure to understand that David had nothing to do with it. The only way David could find relief from Saul was to defect to the Philistines, and he becomes a servant, a vassal of Achish, king of Gath. And Achish, king of Gath, gives him Ziklag as a city, and it'll actually now become an Israelite city because he gives it to David. And David claims to Achish that he keeps attacking Israelites and Kenites, but he's actually attacking the enemies of Israel to their south, the Amalekites and others. And now there's going to be this great battle between the Philistines and the Israelites. And in chapter 28, Saul has been abandoned by God. No message is coming from God. And we're told Saul had already got rid of all the necromancers and everybody like that. But Saul, in his desperation, finds a necromancer and wants to have Samuel's spirit conjured up for him. And Samuel's ghost is conjured up for him and tells him, yeah, God's not talking to you because he's abandoned you. You're going to be with me. You and your son's going to be with me tomorrow. This is the end of you. And Saul is grieved, but that's what Saul's going to have to deal with. When the Philistines all gather, David gathers with them as one of Achish's vassals. And the Philistines are like, this dude killed a bunch of us. He's an Israelite. We don't want him here. And so he is sent away. And we're told that the Amalekites had meanwhile come and destroyed Ziklag. So we're supposed to see two parallel sides of events. So in chapter 29 and 30, we're supposed to see how David, seeing that Ziklag was burned down and taken, pursues the Amalekites. They find a servant guy who says where they are. They go, they attack all the Amalekites. They kill them all off. They take back all the spoil. Everything that had been lost was taken back and restored. While that's all going on, we're to imagine that there's this great battle that's going on in chapter 31 at Mount Gilboa, when Saul and the Philistines are fighting, and the Philistines get the better of them. They kill Jonathan, they kill all of the sons of Saul in the war battle who are there. They injure Saul. Saul asks his armor bearer to kill him. The armor bearer won't do it, so Saul kills himself. The armor bearer kills himself. There's a great slaughter. The Philistines rejoice. They grab the bodies of Saul and Jonathan. They kind of hang them up in honor of their gods. The men of Jabesh Gilead, remembering what Saul had done for them, valiantly recovered their bodies and provided them proper burial. And that's the end of the book of 1 Samuel. And we see the tragedy of the reign of Saul, where Saul had so much opportunity, so much potential. He had gained so many great victories. But in the end, Israel is pretty much in the same predicament at the end of Saul's reign as they were in the beginning. Defeated by the Philistines, oppressed by the Philistines. The only difference, of course, is that in the meantime, David has arisen. And that will be the hope that will be extended and manifest in 2 Samuel, when the situation will change quite dramatically for Israel because of what God will accomplish through David. Thus we see what happens in 1 Samuel. We can see the ambivalence about having a king, but what happens when you have the king? Where it was worse without a king in many ways, but not like having a king made it a lot better. And there's a lot we can gain from 1 Samuel and seeing that predicament and the story of Israel. And it's all important for us to trust in God and to follow after him. Thus, we have 1 Samuel. If you have any questions, comments, or thoughts about anything we've talked about in 1 Samuel, we'd love to hear about it. Let us know and continue our conversation in the comments. I'm Ethan with the Adventist Church of Christ. We're a non-denominational church of Los Angeles. We'd love to be of encouragement to you. Can we study the Bible with you? Would you like to meet with us? Can we pray for you? How can we be of service to you? Please let us know. Reach out to us at AdventistChurchOfChrist.org. You can also find us on social media at Adventist Church of Christ. We again thank you. Have a great day, and may the Lord bless and keep you until we meet again.